Welcome to the Chapter 4 review, answer key video explanation. So as we go through the answer key for the Chapter 4 test review, please make sure that you are adding notes, reminders, or correcting any incorrect work that you need to so that you can use your review as a study guide and a resource on the upcoming test. Before you change your answers, please make sure that you did, in Google Classroom, turn in your copy of your first attempt at the review. So going into the first section of the 6 graphs, you have 3 different methods that you can choose from based on what we learned in this chapter. Method 1 that works every time, but it takes a little bit more work, is to create an XY table, choose numbers that you're going to put in for X, and then solve for Y to get your ordered pairs. If the equation is in standard form, I would use the XY-intercept approach, where you find the x-intercept by putting a 0 in for Y, you find the y-intercept by putting a 0 in for x, you graph those 2 points, connect them, and you have your line. Or if the equation is already in slope-intercept form, I would recommend using the slope-intercept form shortcut. So if it's already in y equals mx plus b, or you could, like in numbers 1 and 2, change the standard form into slope-intercept form as well. And then the second part tells us to state whether the slope of the line is positive, negative, 0, or undefined. So in examples 1 and 2, our equation is written in standard form. So by the numbers up on top, you can see that I did show what they would look like when rewritten into y equals mx plus b. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to look at the other method for these two of using the x and y intercept. When we get down to numbers 5 and 6, we'll go through the slope-intercept approach. But on 1 and 2, if you did rewrite them to use slope-intercept for number 1, that equation would become y equals a negative 1/3 x plus 2, and in number 2 would be y equals 2/5 x plus 2. But the approach I would use, because it doesn't require us rearranging the equation, is the x or y intercept approach. So to find our y-intercept first, we are going to put a 0 into the original equation for x. So we would have 0 plus 3y equals 6, divide both sides by 3, and y equals 2. So I'm going to cross my y-axis at a positive 2. So that point would be 0, 2. Then to figure out our x-intercept, and remember the x-axis runs left to right, y-intercept is the vertical one. So to figure out our x-intercept, we're going to put a 0 into the original equation for y. So that'd become x plus 3 times 0 equals 6, or simply x equals 6. So that point would be 6, 0. You plot your 2 points, the x and y-intercept, connect them, and you have your line. Now, if the line is going down from left to right, it is a negative slope. If the line's going up left to right, it's a positive slope. So in number 2, again, I'd use the x and y-intercept approach. So to get your y-intercept, put a 0 in for x. So we end up with negative 2 times 0 plus 5y equals 10, which is just 5y equals 10. Divide both sides by 5, and y equals 2. So we're crossing the y-axis at 2, or the coordinate 0, 2. Then to get our x-intercept, we're putting a 0 in for y, so we end up with negative 2x equals 10, or x equals negative 5 when we divide by the negative 2. So then that point is negative 5, 0. So left 5 up 0, other point over 0 up 2, connect your points, and you have your line. It's going up left to right, so the slope would be positive. In 3 and 4, we get our two special situations for lines. If there is no y and it's simply x equals a number, you get a vertical line through that number. So x equals 3 tells me go over to 3 and draw a vertical line. The slope of any vertical line is always undefined. Then in 4, if y equals any number, in this case -5, along the y-axis, we'd go down to 5, and we would draw a horizontal line at -5. The slope of any horizontal line is always 0. And now 5 and 6. 5 and 6, you'll see I didn't do any math with them because they're already written in slope-intercept form. So I just look at the equation to create my graph. So in number 5, y equals 1x minus 4, or x minus 4. So my y-intercept is a -4. So I'm crossing my y-axis at a -4. So go to the point, 0, -4, put your dot. From that point, you follow the slope. So if our slope is the number in front of x, it's 1, or 1 over 1. So we would go up 1, right 1, there's your next point. Up 1, right 1, there's your next point. Now that you have 3 points, draw your line through the 3. I recommend using 3 points in case you made a mistake and one doesn't line up, then you know you went wrong somewhere. In number 6, again, slope-intercept form, a -2/3 x, so I already know my slope is a negative, because it's a -2/3, just like on the last one, 1x told me slope was positive. And my y-intercept is a +5. So from 0, 0, I'd go up 5 to get my y-intercept. Put your point there. Then from the y-intercept, we follow the slope of -2 over 3. So we would go down 2, right 3. There's your next point. Down 2, right 3. There's your next point. Connect your 3 points to draw your line. Now moving into finding the slope. So not saying if it's positive, negative, 0, or undefined, just simply finding the slope, we're going to use the change in y over change in x. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And a reminder here, all ordered pairs are written x value first, y value second. So we know the y values have to be on top for slope, x values have to be on bottom. So in number 7, on top, I would have 5 minus a -4. 5 minus a -4 is 5 plus 4. Then because I began with the 5 on top, I need to use the 7 first on bottom. So on bottom, it'd be 7 minus 1. So we have 9 over 6, which simplifies to 3/2, or 1 1/2. I would recommend leaving your slope as the improper fraction. In 8, our y values are 3 and -6. So on top, 3 minus a -6 is the same as 3 plus 6. On bottom, our x values, -1 and -1. So we'd have a -1 minus -1, which is a -1 plus 1. Anything over 0, we cannot divide by 0. Doesn't matter what level of math you get to. Division of 0 or division by 0 is always undefined. You cannot take a value and put it into 0 groups. So if you ever have a 0 on bottom, your slope is undefined. Numbers 9 and 10 are dealing with identifying functions. So remember, to be a function, each input has one unique output. So it cannot have two different numbers for an output. So if we look at number 9, our input of 4 has two different outputs of 0 and 1, so that is not a function. And then in 10, if they graph a figure and they want us to tell if it's a function, we'll use the vertical line test. If you can draw a single vertical line anywhere on this coordinate plane that crosses the graph more than once, it is not a function. So this obviously hits my figure twice, so this would not be a function. In 11 and 12, we're dealing with function notation and substituting in a value for x. So in 11, we have f of x equals 10 minus 6 times x. They want us to evaluate when x equals 3. So f of 3 equals 10 minus 6 times 3. Have to follow the order of operations, so multiply 6 times 3 before the subtraction. So we have 10 minus 18, so f of 3 gives us a negative 8. Now what that tells us is the ordered pair here would be 3, comma, negative 8. So whatever your input is, terrible 8. So if we were going to write that as an ordered pair, it'd be 3, comma, negative 8. Input goes as the x value, output is your y value. If we look over at number 12, on 12 we have g of x equals a negative 3.5 times x plus 4. We are solving or evaluating when x equals negative 2. So g of negative 2 equals negative 3.5 times the negative 2 plus 4. Negative times a negative is a positive, so 7 plus 4, which is 11. So g of negative 2 equals 11. 13 and 14, we are determining if an ordered pair is a solution to an equation. So we are taking the ordered pair that they give us and substituting the first value in for x, second value for y. And then we are checking if this equation is still true. So 2 times 3 minus 3 times negative 4, we're checking does that equal 18. 2 times 3 is 6. Negative 3 times negative 4 is a positive 12. 6 plus 12 is 18. So 18 equals 18 is true. So yes, that ordered pair is a solution. In 14, we are checking the ordered pair 4, comma 1. So the 4 goes in for x, 1 for y. 3/4 times 4 plus 5 equals negative 8 times 1. That gives us, on the left, 3/4 times 4 is 3. So 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 does not equal a negative 8, so that would not be a solution. Now for 15, 16, 17, they tell us the variables very directly. They want us to write the direct variation equation. So our basic direct variation equation is always y equals k times x. The letter k is the constant of variation. So the first thing we need to do is to set these up to solve for k. So in 15, we're going to write y equals k times x, putting a 21 in for y and a 7 for x. So we have 21 equals k times 7. Divide both sides by 7, and 3 equals k. So our direct variation equation would be y equals 3 times x. Once you have k, you just put it in for the k value and rewrite the original equation. For 16, same thing. X is a negative 8, y is 20. So 20 equals k times negative 8. Divide by the negative 8. 20 divided by negative 8 simplifies to negative 5/2, or negative 2.5. So y would equal -5/2 times x. And in 17, it's the same process. And then after we get our equation, they want us to find y when x is a -2. So first, we still need to use the original x of 6, y of -30 to find k. So -30 equals k times 6. Divide both sides by 6, and a -5 equals k. So my equation would be y equals -5x. We substitute in the -2 for x. So y equals -5 times -2. Final answer, y equals 10. So make sure you read the directions all the way through, that you don't forget to do this last part. And then our last example. 18 asks us to write the linear equation with two variables and use that to answer the question. So I'm using x and y. You could use whatever letters you want. And in my equation, y is going to be the height left, and x is going to be the number of hours. But let's look at the scenario. It says a candle starts at 8 inches tall, and it's burning at a rate of 1.5 inches per hour. What's the height of the candle after 4 hours? So our original equation with two variables, the candle starts at 8 inches and is losing or burning 1.5 inches per hour. So y would equal 8 minus 1.5x. Or we could write that as y equals -1.5x plus 8. Same thing. Then to answer the question, the height of the candle after 4 hours, we would put the 4 in for x. So y would equal 8 minus 1.5 times 4. So 8 minus 6 tells us after 4 hours, the candle height is 2 inches.